Whether you're dodging pesky ads, sneaky trackers, or just wanting to keep your browsing habits under wraps, Surfshark is absolutely how you should do that. Surfshark VPN is today's sponsor and your personal privacy bodyguard. With over 3,200 servers in 100 plus countries, you can virtually travel anywhere in the world, bypassing annoying content restrictions and accessing your favorite shows and sites like you're at home. Or maybe you're at home and you just want more content from another country. Boom, Surfshark, fire it up, jump on over somewhere else and get that new content. Plus, it doesn't stop there. Surfshark lets you secure an unlimited amount of devices with one account. Whether you're on your laptop, phone, tablet, you are covered. No more juggling limited devices with Surfshark. Everyone's covered. Plus, they got a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk. Plus, they got 24/7 customer support in case you get stuck on something, but you won't. It's very easy to use. So if you're tired of the internet peeking over your shoulder, give Surfshark a go. Enter the promo code ITS for 4 months extra at surfshark.com/ITS. And a huge thanks to them for sponsoring. And now today's video. There are few feelings more uncomfortable than when something terrible is happening and you know there is absolutely nothing that you can do to change or prevent it. But what if that awful, sinking feeling was literally as bad as it could possibly be? What if you knew that your death was imminent and there's nothing that you could do about it except wait for the fate that you know is inevitable? This is exactly the situation that 149 people found themselves in on one tragic morning in 2015. This is the story of Germanwings flight 9525, when what was meant to be a short flight from Spain to Germany turned into a nightmare that would claim the lives of everyone on board. The story begins on the morning of March the 24th, 2015, at Terminal 2 of El Prat Airport in Barcelona, Spain. 144 passengers from 18 countries were boarding a 24-year-old Airbus A320 bound for Düsseldorf, Germany. The plane was operated by Germanwings, a former German low-cost airliner owned by Lufthansa. In addition to the passengers, the flight included 6 crew members, 4 stewardesses, the pilot, and the co-pilot. The pilot in command of the flight was Captain Patrick Sondenheimer, a 34-year-old from Düsseldorf. He had been flying for 10 years and had logged a total of 6,000 flight hours, with 3,812 of them being on the Airbus A320. The captain had recently switched to short-haul routes to spend more time with his family. The co-pilot was 27-year-old Andreas Lubitz. He had 2 years flying experience with 630 flight hours, 540 of them on the Airbus A320. Flight 9525 was scheduled to take off from Barcelona at 9:35 a.m. and arrive in Düsseldorf at 11:39. After an uneventful boarding process and a brief delay, the plane became airborne at 10:01 a.m. The flight began normally. The A320 left the runway in Barcelona and began climbing toward its assigned cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. Shortly after the plane reached cruising altitude, the captain made an announcement apologizing to the passengers for the delay and promising to make up for the lost time. He then began to brief the co-pilot on the landing procedure that they would follow in Düsseldorf. We know from the plane's cockpit voice recorder that the co-pilot responded to this briefing with, "Hopefully, we'll see," a reply that is chilling, given what was about to take place. We don't know if the captain heard this, but no reply from him was picked up on the voice recorder. A few minutes later, at 10:31 a.m., the captain left the cockpit to use the lavatory. While he was out of the cockpit, the captain felt the plane start to steadily lose altitude. Upon attempting to return to the cockpit, he found that the door was locked. He first attempted to use an emergency code to gain access, but this code had been disabled from within the cockpit. He then tried knocking and using an intercom to request access to the cockpit, but there was no response from Lubitz. Following continued attempts to gain access to the cockpit, the captain asked flight attendants to retrieve a crowbar that was kept hidden in the back of the plane. He attempted to pry the door open with the tool, but his attempts were unsuccessful. Following the 9/11 terror attacks in the United States, plane cockpit doors have been reinforced specifically to prevent those outside the cockpit from gaining unwanted access. At this point, the plane had lost about 10,000 feet of altitude. The captain could be heard yelling, "For the love of God, open this door." Around this time, the descent began to take place more rapidly, initiating panic amongst the passengers. As the passengers started to ask questions and leave their seats, the captain continued attempting to gain access to the cockpit with the crowbar. As the plane descended below 10,000 feet, the passengers could see the snow-capped mountains of the French Alps growing closer and closer. The last thing heard from the captain is him yelling, "Open this door." A terrain warning can then be heard in the cockpit, instructing the pilot to pull up immediately to avoid an imminent collision. The co-pilot in the cockpit did nothing. The last thing heard on the cockpit voice recorder is the sound of passengers screaming, accompanied by a high-pitched ping indicating dangerous proximity to the ground. At an altitude of 5,000 feet, the right wing of the aircraft clipped a mountainside. Moments later, the fuselage collided with the mountains, going just over 400 miles per hour near the commune of Prets-Haute-Bléone in France. A seismological station, located 7.5 miles away from the crash site, detected the impact, identifying the time of impact as 10:41 a.m. The plane impacted the southern face of a mountain at an altitude of 5,085 feet. Bizarrely, this location was only 6 miles away from the location of the crash of Air France Flight 178 in 1953. Rescue crews arrived at the location of the crash by helicopter at around 11 a.m. and were met with a truly grisly scene. The plane had been completely disintegrated by the impact of the crash, with the largest single piece being about the size of a car. The debris field was spread over approximately 500 acres. Rescue crews began searching through the pieces of the plane, luggage, and human remains as they attempted to find clues that could assist authorities in determining the cause of the crash. Astoundingly, crews found the cockpit voice recorder within 25 minutes of searching this massive debris field. Although it had sustained some damage, it was still intact and functional. The crews collected it and sent it to Paris for analysis. Within the next week, the flight data recorder was also found and shipped off to be examined by the authorities. Upon analyzing the data from the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, scrutiny immediately turned towards the co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz. Lubitz knew that he wanted to become a pilot from a very young age. Upon graduating from high school, he was accepted into Lufthansa's pilot training school, the selective program that accepts just 5% of applicants. However, Lubitz dropped out after just 2 months in this program. Authorities determined that this was due to a deep depression that Lubitz had fallen into. 6 months after receiving treatment for the condition, Lubitz was cleared by a psychiatrist to return to pilot training. His flying license was reinstated, with a stipulation specifying that he would be automatically grounded if he required any future treatment for severe depression. Upon completing the first phase of pilot training in Germany, the next step of Lubitz's training would take place at Lufthansa's flight school in Arizona. Attending this school requires foreign pilots to be cleared by the United States' Federal Aviation Authority, or FAA. Pilots are asked to report any previous mental conditions as part of the screening process in order to receive this clearance. When Lubitz completed the required form, he failed to report any of his previous struggles with mental health. This lie was detected by a German flight doctor prior to his final submission to the FAA. Even though this omission qualified as a criminal offense, Lubitz was able to simply resubmit his form. On his second attempt, he accurately reported his past struggles with mental health and he was accepted for training in Arizona. After completing that flight training, Lubitz returned to Germany, where he continued his pilot training while working as a flight attendant. He finally joined Germanwings as a pilot in 2013, 5 years after beginning his training. Despite a stretch of relative stability, Lubitz began to struggle with his mental health within a year. His final depressive episode began with a notion that he was losing his eyesight. Lubitz sought the help of multiple ophthalmologists with complaints of light sensitivity as well as seeing constant flashing lights and streaks. These doctors detected no problems with his eyes, and some suggested that he could be suffering from psychosomatic symptoms, where the mind manifests physical symptoms when it is convinced that something is wrong. Lubitz rejected these suggestions from his doctors. He was terrified that his failing eyesight would ruin his career that he had worked so hard for. He was also frustrated at what he felt was a total lack of validation from his doctors. He began to suffer from severe insomnia as his mental state continued to decline. Eventually, it seems that he did begin to accept that perhaps the cause of his vision problems was psychological. He decided to seek treatment from the psychiatrist that had treated him when he dropped out of the pilot training program. The doctor noted that Lubitz's extreme depression had returned, but the doctor did not report this to Lubitz's employer. Lubitz was in a very dark place by March of 2015. Investigators discovered that he had performed internet searches on how to produce carbon monoxide, what poisons kill without pain, and the effects of drinking gasoline. Prior to Lubitz's final flight, he visited a doctor one last time for vision problems. The doctor excused Lubitz from flying for 4 days due to these issues. It was while he was home during this sick leave that his mind would drift toward his future deadly actions. He investigated the locking mechanism of the Airbus A320 cockpit door. Investigators also found a note in the trash that Lubitz had written the day before he returned to work. At the top of the note was Decision Sunday and BCN, the code for Barcelona's El Prat Airport. Below this heading were several options: find the inner will to work and continue to live, deal with stress and sleeplessness, and finally, let myself go. Between this time and the crash, nobody who interacted with Lubitz noticed anything different about his demeanor. His girlfriend said that he was behaving normally, and a pilot that flew a round-trip route with Lubitz from Dusseldorf to Berlin on March the 23rd similarly noticed nothing unusual about him. Finally, Decision Sunday, as Lubitz had designated it, arrived. On the first leg of the trip from Dusseldorf to Barcelona, there were seemingly no noticeable differences in Lubitz's behavior. However, the flight data recorder would later reveal that Lubitz experimented with setting the plane's autopilot to 100 feet while the captain briefly left the cockpit. The flight data recorder would also reveal that this is exactly how Lubitz caused the crash on the return flight to Dusseldorf. The aftermath of this tragic event was felt all over the world, with victims' families being located as far away as Mexico, Japan, and Australia. They varied in age from toddlers to the elderly. They were mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, grandparents. They were college students, opera singers, reporters, businessmen and women, architects, film editors. It was a diverse flight, full of passengers whose lives contained immeasurable potential. However, every single one of these lives came to an abrupt and tragic end in a moment. One of the most gut-wrenching details that would be revealed following the crash was the loss of 16 students and 2 of their teachers from a single school in Halton, Germany. They were returning from participating in a Spanish exchange program. Many more students from this school wanted to go, but space for the trip was limited. The school used a lottery system to select participants, and these students were the children that were selected. 11 weeks after the crash, a photographer captured the haunting image of a convoy of hearses returning the students' remains to Halton. As more details came to light about the circumstances leading to the crash, outrage began to develop amongst the victims' families. To make things worse, Lufthansa, Germanwings' parent company, resisted accepting responsibility for the crash. The company's CEO insisted that Lubitz was 100% fit to fly. The company even went as far to insist that they too were a victim of the tragedy. Legally, the airline's responsibility for the crash was limited, and existing laws state that when customers buy an airline ticket, they are accepting a certain amount of risk that something could go wrong. In accordance with these laws, the company offered the victims' families €50,000 to cover travel and funeral expenses, in addition to €25,000 for pain and suffering. However, families of the victims insisted that this was not simply a case of unavoidable risk. They asserted that this tragedy was the result of negligence on the behalf of Lufthansa. Offended by the insignificant amount of compensation offered, the families of 42 of the flight's German passengers took legal action in an attempt to force Lufthansa to increase their compensation. The families requested an additional €250,000 for each immediate family member of each victim. However, Lufthansa reiterated that they had no legal obligation to do so. They instead agreed to provide an additional €10,000 for each family member. Following Lufthansa's resistance to provide adequate compensation to the families of the victims, a lawyer from New York City representing 81 families filed a class action lawsuit against Lufthansa's flight school in Arizona. This lawsuit alleged that the flight school had facilitated Lubitz's ability to cause the crash by failing to act appropriately when he failed to report his mental health struggles. The suit was eventually thrown out of court when a judge determined that the case did not belong in the US court system. The case reverted to German courts, which dismissed the case after reiterating that neither Lufthansa nor the flight school bore any legal responsibility for the crash. From a regulatory perspective, Lufthansa initially insisted that there was no need for them to make any changes to their procedures following the crash. This was met with intense criticism, which led to Lufthansa backtracking and instead requiring 2 crew members to be in the cockpit at all times. Regulatory agencies and airlines from Canada, the EU, Australia, and the UAE would also pass similar recommendations or regulations in response to the crash. Some other countries, like the US, had already instated this regulation following the 9/11 attacks. A risk analysis system called the Swiss cheese model is sometimes used when reviewing aviation disasters. The model views every safeguard built into a system as a slice of Swiss cheese, each of which contains some unavoidable flaws represented by its holes. If you imagine a stack of Swiss cheese slices, each hole is almost always going to be blocked by the next slice in the stack. That represents how multiple safeguards can work together to prevent disasters. However, on very rare occasions, the safeguards fail. These are the cases where the holes present on each slice of Swiss cheese line up perfectly, allowing a threat to pass through all safeguards and cause problems. What we see in the case of Germanwings Flight 9525 is a perfect example of this model. At multiple steps of Lubitz's professional journey, there was an opportunity for him to be identified as a potential threat. His failure to report his struggles with mental health to the United States' FAA could have prevented him from starting flight school if he was properly punished. One of his routine pilot medical assessments could have detected a change in his mindset. His psychiatrist could have reported his worsening depression to his employer. However, none of this happened. Lubitz slipped through the holes of each potential safeguard, and the result was the event that unfolded on March 24, 2015, when 149 innocent people's lives were robbed from them on one of commercial aviation's darkest days. As we conclude this video, it is important to note that Lubitz's case is a unique and rare example. Just because someone struggles with their mental health does not by any means indicate that they're likely to hurt others. Furthermore, mental health struggles don't even make someone unfit to perform a specific job. Indeed, studies have determined that anywhere from 4 to 13% of pilots suffer from depression. Despite this fact, depression is incredibly unlikely to have any impact on a pilot's ability to achieve professional success. The FAA reports that only 0.1% of pilots who disclose mental health conditions have their flight medical certification denied. The rest receive treatment for their conditions and are free to go on and lead fulfilling careers. And finally, if you're struggling with depression, please know things get better, help is available, and the world is a better place with you in it.